Hi booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing very well. I'm trying to catch up on the tag videos that I've been tagged in, and this is one I was tagged in recently, and I thought I'd get to this before I get to a number of sort of Christmas related tags. So I thought I'd get this one done and then I can do a few focused on Christmas. But this tag here is the shelf respect tag. It was created by Richard from History Lit, and it's a tag full of many of the questions I love to think about my own books and my own book collection. But I'm also curious about whenever I encounter another bookish person, or if I'm watching a certain booktuber, I'm always sort of wondering about these sorts of questions. So I always enjoy these tags that incorporate them. So we'll jump in. The first question is, how do you organise the books on your shelves? So if you look behind me, that they're roughly organised by subject matter. So above my head and going down to about this shelf here is all poetry, organised alphabetically by the author's name, and I generally do that for each section. I have it alphabetical, and then just below there, let's see if I move out of the way, maybe you'll be able to see there's some Penguin Classics there, and then below the Penguin Classics there are two more shelves, and there's they're both non-fictions. There's a shelf that's mainly history, with some travel writing in there as well, and then below that it's mainly biographies, and a good number of them are just literary biographies. And then this bookshelf all the way down is mostly fiction, or what you might term as sort of classic literature, I suppose. There are some works in there that are maybe more of a memoir, or sort of diaries or something like that. And although I have sort of diaries and memoirs in with the non-fiction, they sometimes get included, just sort of depending on I suppose on the writer and the way it's written, or my general preconceptions of the book. And then actually next to that, and it's something I haven't really explored in any library tour yet. I might try and finish off my 2024 library tour. I thought I'd finished it, and then it changed slightly, so I've got a bit more to do. And I'll see if I can move the camera. So we've got some craft things there, and then there's another bookshelf just there with the amp on top, and there's more poetry there. A few years ago I was given a few sort of poetry anthologies and books on poetry, so a number of them that I couldn't fit are on there, along with a little bit more non-fiction, things like Kafka's diaries, and a few just pieces of non-fiction that I couldn't quite place, I suppose, along with sort of Northern anthologies, my Norton Shakespeare, and then a lot of sort of drama that sort of goes along with Shakespeare, and then some sort of literary magazines and things like that. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge, that bookcase, and it's the only bookcase really, at least up here, where there's no alphabetical order either. It's just sort of thrown in there on the whole. And there are books elsewhere in the house then as well. There's a bookcase that has sort of quite a small bookcase that has three shelves. The top shelf is mainly mysteries and things like that, and then below that there's a shelf of what's mostly, or was initially mostly, mythology and ancient epics and things like that. Some of them have ended up here, but also not all of, but a number of my Everyman's Library editions are down there on that shelf as well. It's just sort of how it's ended up. And then there's another bookcase downstairs with sort of more recent fiction on it, and some fantasy and children's literature and things like that. So there's a mix throughout the house, and sort of every kind of genre more or less has its place. So I'm thinking that eventually there's going to have to be some kind of restructuring and reorganisation, since some of the boundaries have blurred a little bit. That's roughly how things stand at the moment. 5 minutes in, that's question one. Number two is, have you ever merged your collection with a significant other? Yes, so it is a mix. There are books here that that were my wife's before we were together, and yeah, but we've just merged them since our reading tastes are like two circles of a Venn diagram. We don't always read the same things, but there are definitely crossovers, and yeah, it kind of makes sense. In this room, you know, a good, I don't know, probably 80-90% of it is my stuff, but then it, you know, changes on some of the other shelves in other parts of the house. Number three is, do you write your name and or the price you paid in your books? I don't keep a track of the price I've paid for books. It'd be interesting to do that now. Now I think of it. For a while I did write my name in my books, and then I think I just fell out of the habit of doing it. Thought it was a little, I don't know, but part of me felt it was a bit silly. I don't know why, and so it's not something that I've done for quite a few years now, probably since before COVID, and also my handwriting's terrible, so it always looks a bit silly. Number four is, do you keep all the books you've read or only the most cherished? I don't keep every book that I've read. It is rare for me to get rid of a book straight after reading it. So I don't necessarily think of it in terms of keeping the books I've most cherished, but more of every now and then I look at my shelves and I think of the question of whether I'm going to revisit it, reread it, whether it's something I want to talk about on booktube, whether or not, I don't know, sometimes I don't like a book, but I might want to give it another go in the future. And so I sort of measure these things up. I measure how much I might want to reread it in the future and things like that, and then I might get rid of it. And obviously if it's a book I love and cherish and it's an edition I like, I tend to keep it. And so that's more how I think of it. So that most of the books in the house are either books I love and have cherished, books I have yet to read, or books that I have read and would like to try again. So keeping that, I don't know, there's a lot of memories there on the shelves, but there's also a lot of possibility there as well. Number five is, does the style or quality of your bookshelves matter? Sorry, I've sort of read that wrong, but yeah, do the style or quality of your bookshelves or bookcases matter? Not too much. I suppose there are certain styles I don't like. I like the relative simplicity of these. So Richard in his videos, you know, talking about people who go out and buy you know, Billy bookcases from IKEA, which is is what these are. But I like them for their simplicity, and I like the fact that they're relatively flexible, and I can buy extra shelves to fit in them if I want to. which is something I'm thinking of doing. I'm thinking of maybe getting one or two more and utilising a bit more of this space. Um, so we'll see how that goes. There have been bookshelves. I was in a flat once that was furnished, and it already had its own bookcases, and it was the kind where there was a kind of a little bit of a panel coming out just to the side, so that the first book on each end of the shelf, you couldn't see what it was, and I don't like the idea of there being hidden books in the book in the bookshelf on the bookcase. It's a bit annoying, and so again, that's why I like the simplicity, and there are better, probably better, more durable, slightly more solid options out there. But for me, something like this serves me quite well. We'll get into the downsides later, I think. Number 6 is, do you have any gripes or complaints about bookcase construction? So I suppose this is this is the time to get into that. So, as I was saying, I don't like any kind of bookcase construction where there's something in it that's going to sort of cover up part of, or maybe even an entire book at each side. As mentioned in Richard's video, and also in Steve Donahue, he just responded to this as well. The possibility of shelves bowing, it is a bit distressing, and that is the one downside to these Billy bookcases, is that the shelves do have a tendency to do that, at least some of them do. And it's often on the shelves I don't expect to. So on this bookcase here, there are some shelves with loads of really big fat novels on them, and it's, it seems perfectly straight. And then behind me on the poetry bookcase, there are some shelves. I think there's one shelf where it's loads of really, really small, light books, and yet I don't know, maybe it's a maths thing, but somehow they're heavier than these other shelves of big books, because they're bowing in the middle, and we'll see. I'm not massively concerned, I suppose, but it's a little bit annoying. But yeah, it's not something that keeps me up at night, but yeah, it can be a bit annoying. Number 7 is, do you ever stack books horizontally? And I do occasionally. I don't think not on any of the ones you can see behind me, but on the white bookcase when I showed you, I had a couple of pillars of horizontal books in there, and I suppose it's quite useful in a situation like this where you've got loads of books of different heights, and so there's it's sort of restricting how low the shelf above can be, and so if you've got this sort of vertical space that you could potentially use up, then stacking horizontally can be quite useful. I on that bookcase I was talking about, I really didn't like, in that flat with the sort of flaps at the side, or whatever you want to call them. I sort of outgrew those shelves quite quickly, so that my entire sort of collection of books was eventually stacked horizontally, and I didn't particularly like it. I didn't like the way it looked, and I didn't find it all that practical for accessing books either. And so I'll do the occasional pillar, so most of them are vertical, and then there'll just be the occasional pillar of horizontal books, but I, as much as possible, try to avoid it, just because particularly when they're all horizontal. And then number 8 is, what are your 5 favourite jackets or covers? I think I've got sort of roughly 5. I'm not entirely sure if these are my all-time top 5, but there's certainly 5 of my favourites. Here's one that I've not shown much in past videos, I don't think. This is Letters to Commando by Edmund de Waal, a relatively recent memoir. I just love this dust jacket. I just think it's a really handsome looking book. But then it's also just lovely underneath the dust jacket as well, if I can get it off. You know, so, and it's a lovely colour, and if you can make out, there's this emboss of the motif that's on the dust jacket on there, so that's really lovely. So it's, yeah, just a really handsome book, just as it is, and with its jacket. And then as sort of generally speaking, as editions go, I mean, I could talk about Penguin Classics. They're one that I really love, but I thought I'd go with one that's sort of a rising star in my library. I don't see these editions as often, so I've only got 2, but I like the way they look, I like the way they feel, and it's the the Modern Library edition. So here's their very battered copy, sort of a anthology of American transcendentalism, and I've also got Whitman's Leaves of Grass in a Modern Library edition. I love the way they feel, and I like their covers. They're generally quite tasteful, yeah, but I found them to be a good alternative to Penguin Classics. I also like the New York Review of Books Classics, and I particularly like this cover for Hermito von Dodderer's The Strudeloff Steps. I've yet to read this. It's high on my list of priorities for next year, which I've been saying for a year or 2 now. But if fingers crossed, I'll be reading it in 2025. Again, as particular editions go, I love Everyman's Library. They're probably, for hardcover covers, they're the edition that I go for classics, and particularly this kind of era of them as well. Just the plain cover, I like the way they look. I don't care too much for how they look. Oh, this one's the oh dear, the kind of flyleaf has been glued to the let's see if I can get it off this way. I don't care too much for how they look, you know, without the jacket. I could kind of take them or leave them, but I love the way they look with the jacket, particularly this that particular design. They've sort of updated them a couple of times since. And another individual book where I just love the cover is The House of Government by Yuri Slezkine. And I love the spine of this as well. Just this little elevator shaft, and this guy just waiting there. Yeah, I just really love the design of this book and the design of it, and it's a brilliant book as well. And then the next is what are your 5 most disliked jackets or covers. I think I do have I've got 6 books here, but they're really representative of 3 things I don't like. I couldn't quite sort of work out 5 individuals. So I've got 6 books here, but they're representative of 3 categories in my head, if that makes sense. So there's just this book where I don't much like the cover of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know, it seems a little cheap, I suppose. I suppose Dracula is one of those hard ones. I think anything that's kind of gothic, it can be difficult to get it right. It can, you know, this seems, even though it's got blood on it, but it seems a little too clean to me. for Dracula, but you know, there's the possibility then of just going too crazy or too over the top with all the gothic elements, and so it is a hard one to do. I don't particularly like either the current Penguin Classic cover for it either, with the sort of silhouette Nosferatu style thing going on. I don't particularly like that either, so it'll be I think it'll be a while before I find a cover of Dracula that I like, although it's one of my favourite books. And then I always feel sad when there's a really bad Wordsworth's Classics cover, because I think they just have a terrible, I don't know, a terrible habit of selecting just bad looking covers, and I've got rid of the Wordsworth Classics where I don't like the covers. One of the worst ones, it's probably one of the worst illustrations for a for a classic book that I can think of, would be the Wordsworth Classic edition of James Hogg's the memoirs of a what is it? The Memoirs of a Justified Sinner, or the Confessions and Memoirs of a Justified Sinner. I can't exactly remember the title, but it's an awful, awful cover. If you want to try and look it up, but then sometimes they do some pretty good covers like this Dostoevsky short stories volume and Wuthering Heights. You know, they're simple but effective covers that give you a feel for the book, and so I know they can do it, and yet so often the cover's really bad. And then I was thinking of poetry books, and there's a kind of poetry cover that I really don't like. The first one I like to show you is these are the complete poems of Marianne Moore. As you can see, that you've got that reflection there, and it's this plastic sort of laminated cover, and I particularly don't like, and also just with this sort of rather boring, lazy design as well, it just gives me the impression that they didn't really particularly care about how the book looked, and to be honest, the look of the book, the type of paper it's printed on, and all of that kind of puts me off reading it, even though I enjoy Marianne Moore. I kind of don't want to read this just because of how it feels. And you know, I think so that was an old Faber edition, this sort of plastic laminated style cover. Annoyingly, so this must have been sort of a back stock. Annoyingly, they updated the edition not long after I bought this, which was quite annoying. And then also there's another publisher that I like, and I love the poetry that they put out, but there's just something to the way their books kind of look and feel, and again, sometimes they're okay, but it's Blood Axe Books, and I don't know, there's just something about them that and they publish great stuff, but I rarely like their covers, rarely like the way they feel, and or anything like that, and so you know, as the poetry goes, they're pretty good, but as objects, I don't particularly like them. Then we're up to number 10, which is really the last proper question here, which is there such a thing as too many books? No. I think sometimes there are times where I've sort of felt that I'm getting towards a place where there are too many books. And I think that's just relative to the number of books around that I'm not interested in, that aren't reflective of my reading. and also relative to my space as well. Um, and yeah, in an ideal world, I would have, you know, an infinite number of books. I would like to not care, and so ideally, there's no such thing as too many books. And if you have a house, full to the brim with books, and that's your um sort of you're sort of trimmed down, pruned, That's the wrong word. Um, anyway, yeah, you trimmed down collection. Then that's kind of the ideal, I suppose. At least for crazy bookish people like me. So yeah, and then the last thing to do before I go is to tag some people. So I'm going to tag my namesake, Aaron from Aaron Read a Book, Debs from Dana Read Stuff, Pat from Book Chat with Pat, and Nicole from A Day of Small Things. And also if you're watching this and you'd like to give this tag a go, then please consider yourself tagged. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for the tag, Richard. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. Okay, take care. Bye bye.